Hey everyone, and welcome to the official Nest.js Fundamentals course. In this course, we are going to be covering the Nest.js framework from top to bottom, getting you up to speed and creating enterprise-grade Node.js applications with the help of Nest.js in no time. So let's introduce the instructors for this course. My name is Kamil, the Nest.js creator, and alongside me is Nest.js core team member Mark, and we are excited to have you learning Nest with us. To get the most out of this course, try to code alongside us, and remember that you can pause the videos at any time. Almost everything we are going to be looking at, learning, and building in this course will be incremental. By the end, you will have a somewhat real-world application and be ready to fully take advantage of the Nest.js framework, even using it as a great jumping-off point for your future applications. Let's dive right in. Before we dive into exactly what Nest.js is, let's take a step back and look at the Node.js ecosystem as a whole. Node.js makes no assumptions and includes almost nothing by default, for it's purposely meant to be very barebones. Node.js by design has a minimalistic setup, and developers are in charge of setting up everything they want to use for their application. This applies to everything from how you handle routing, API calls, setting up WebSockets, to even rudimentary things like code organization, file structure, and naming conventions. As Node.js has been around for many years, and there are plenty of frameworks that have helped make some of these common requirements simpler, most notably Express, but they all still require a lot of configuration and effort on the part of the developer. This ultimate flexibility can be a bit of a double-edged sword, creating potential problems as applications or teams grow very large. Nest.js tries to tackle some of these problems by creating an abstraction, or overall framework, around Node.js, letting you focus on the application problem at hand, instead of the tiny implementation details such as setting up TypeScript, API routing, error handling, middleware setup, and so much more. Nest.js provides an out-of-the-box application architecture that allows developers and teams to create highly testable, scalable, loosely coupled, and easily maintainable applications. But how is this achieved? Think of Nest.js as a layer above Node.js itself, abstracting away difficult tasks, tools, and boilerplate code while also adding a full-fledged toolkit for your application development. Using Nest.js does not lock you into yet another framework, but instead leverages readily available and prominent options and modules in the community, like those available in Express applications. One interesting thing to note is that Nest can even be swapped to use Fastify under the hood instead of Express, which is used by default. Just keep in mind that you may need to use different Fastify compliant libraries in your application if you do this. The flexibility that Nest provides here gives us the ability to create modules that are platform agnostic, not only to HTTP frameworks such as Express or Fastify, but even agnostic across different types of applications. With Nest.js, you can build REST APIs, MVC applications, microservices, GraphQL applications, WebSockets, and even CLIs and cron jobs. With the help of Nest.js dependency injection system, we have the ability to swap out the underlying mechanisms effortlessly. In this course, we are going to be focusing on creating a real-world example REST API application, utilizing and learning about all the great Nest.js features along the way. By the time we finish, you will be ready to tackle any challenge with Nest.js.
Before we get started in this course, let's make sure we have a recent version of Node.js on our machines. If you don't have it installed already, please check the lesson description below to get it set up, or visit the official website at nodejs.org. We can check what version of Node we have installed at any time by opening up our terminal and entering node-version. Make sure you have either the most recent LTS or current versions installed. At the time of this recording, those will be versions 12 or 13. Great! Now that we have Node on our machines, let's get Nest set up. Let's install the Nest command line interface, or CLI, by entering npm-i-g at nestjs/cli. This setup process should only take about a minute or so. We have the CLI already installed, so we'll skip ahead, but if you're following along, pause the video and come back when everything's finished. Once it's done, let's make sure Nest installed correctly by entering nest-version. If you see a version number come back, great, the Nest CLI is good to go. But let's take a quick step back. What is the Nest CLI? Well, the CLI is a companion tool for Nest.js that helps us generate files, run, compile, and even bundle our applications. It's packed with a lot of great commands, but don't worry, you don't have to memorize them all. Just use the command nest-help at any time to help you visualize all of the great things you can do with the Nest CLI. Now that we have the Nest CLI installed, let's utilize it to create our first Nest application. The Nest CLI is going to be doing all the heavy lifting for us: file structuring, installation, configuration, and so on. To create our first application, let's head over to our terminals and enter in nest new. Now the CLI is going to prompt us, what name do we want to use for this new project? Well, throughout this course, we're going to be creating a REST API for a Foursquare-like application that's all about coffee. Let's call it I Love Coffee. Next, the CLI will ask us what package manager we'd like to use. We're going to select NPM, but if you prefer Yarn, go ahead and select the second option. Now we can see that the installation process has started. This might take a minute or so, since Nest is not only going to be scaffolding our entire application, but it's even installing all the dependencies and much more, all without us having to lift a finger. Once everything finishes, let's change our directory into our newly created application by entering cd I Love Coffee. This freshly created I Love Coffee application has everything we need to get started with Nest right away. Now that our application's been created, let's fire it up to see it in action. In our terminals, let's enter in npm run start and hit enter. This command is going to start up our application, firing up an HTTP server listening on port 3000. Once the application finishes running, let's open up our browsers and navigate to localhost 3000, where we should see Hello World coming back from our very own Nest application. With Nest applications, maintaining a separation of concerns has never been easier. This is because inside of Nest applications, everything has a defined structure in place, letting you work on the task at hand rather than worrying about organization or convention. If we look inside the root directory of our project, we'll see a lot of files that you may be familiar with already, such as package.json, tsconfig files, gitignore, ESLint configuration, but most notably here, we have a Nest-specific file called nestcli.json, which we'll dive into later in this course. But the core of our Nest application actually lives in the source directory, so let's open it up and see what we have inside. Firstly, our entire Nest application starts with the main.ts file. In this main.ts file, we can see that our Nest application is being created via nestfactory.create, taking in an app module. With this application reference, we can now listen and bootstrap our application to port 3000. Think of this file like the main starting file for your typical Node.js application, where a lot of root level work needs to be done. But what was this app module we just passed in? Well, app module is the root module for our application containing everything that our app needs to run. This root module itself can contain other small modules that are all different features or chunks themselves, but when brought together here in app module, we get our complete application. Don't worry if this doesn't totally make sense yet, we'll be diving into modules more later on. Let's open up this app module file and take a look inside. As you can see, we have a regular class here, but with the Nest.js @module TypeScript decorator on top. If you're not familiar with decorators, they are simply functions that apply logic. Decorators can be applied to classes like we're seeing here, but also to methods, properties, and even parameters. Nest.js utilizes decorators extensively. You'll be seeing them throughout our code in this course. We can see that within this app module decorator here, we have encapsulated everything that is important to this module's context. We even have a few controllers and providers included with our starter CLI application. Let's take a look at the app controller and see what it has inside. Similar to the module we just saw, a Nest.js controller is also just a class, but with a different @controller decorator on top. We'll be diving deeper into controllers shortly, but for right now, know that controllers are where specific requests are handled by your application. In this controller, we can see that it utilizes the app service provider to help separate out business logic from the controller itself. We'll also be diving into how providers like this work and dependency injection in future lessons. As we said, controllers handle specific requests to our application. We can see that our starter application includes one GET request that is set up for us. This GET request utilizes the app service we just saw calling the getHello method on it. If we dive into the app service provider here and go to definition, we can see that it's simply returning the string of hello world we saw when we ran our application moments ago. And that's the extent of our project so far. Right now we have a very simple application with just one module. But as we grow this application, we'll see how Nest's modular project architecture encourages us to group features such as routes, services, into their own modules. In the end, this helps us maintain a higher level of reusability, testability, and even helps reduce disorganized code in our applications. If some of this doesn't make sense yet, don't worry. It'll all come together as we build out the application throughout this course. Now that we've seen some of the fundamental building blocks of Nest, let's beef up our sample application to really see Nest in action.